Hi, this is Brenda Luther. I've got a welcome or getting started webinar on UBP, specifically the project in evidence-based practice. I'd like you to notice that on your degree plan, UBC is first. That's the objective exam on these competencies, and UBP is second, the project. So please do them in order. Do the objective assessment first. That course of study forces you into content that's new to us about research, using research, examining research, and it gives you the competency to then go out and collect research and understand the research you're pulling from the library. So if you do these out of order, you will have difficulty in gathering research, and that's my best suggestion for you on the plan and process for doing this project. So after you finished the objective exam, it's time to move on to your project. This is what it looks like in task stream. There's 4 competencies related to this: research questions, sources, a research process, and implementing research findings. This isn't a class about doing research, it's a class about applying nursing research. So you're going to go out and look for evidence on a care process that you care about. Now, your textbook will help you define topics. You do not have to have permission for a topic. You just have to examine what you think is important in your nursing practice and get ready to collect evidence and write a literature review. 2 things you're going to do in this task that are really important pieces they're tools for using evidence-based practice. One is developing a matrix that summarizes a lot of evidence, and another is doing an annotation that summarizes the individual pieces. Both of these tools are commonly used in evidence-based practice teams. If you and I were on a committee looking at evidence for CAUTI, for example, we would have to have some kind of tool to put all of our articles together so we could start to compare and contrast them. And a matrix is simply a table that does that. And then we'd also want to do an annotation so we remembered the details of each piece of evidence that was important to our topic. Once you gather 2, 3, 4 pieces of evidence, you really can forget where the important pieces are, what you wanted to remember. So these are tools that help you do evidence. In this project, you're writing a literature review. So you can read about literature reviews in your textbook, and you can explore on them. Literature reviews should be primary research evidence, reports, actual pieces of reports of one study done by authors and reported by those authors. So you're going to develop a problem statement that makes it important. Think of a literature review as a story. I maybe am an inexperienced brand new nurse, and you're mentoring me, and you want me to be as good as you are. You want me to know everything about this topic. You're going to tell me a story about it, and you're going to organize it in a way that I can remember it and comprehend it. So it's rather like a detailed in-service that you're saying, Brenda, sit down and listen up, because here comes your schooling on this problem statement. And this is why it's important to me. A problem statement oftentimes helps it say why nursing should care about this. What are the outcomes or negative outcomes or best practices? You know, problem statements are engaging. What's the reason you went to the library to get these pieces? And before you start on presenting your evidence, you want to be scholarly and say, here's resources or databases where I found this evidence. Our library has excellent resources for you. You can open up the federated database searches and look at different databases and examine those and say, you know, which ones would be good for this topic and why. Every in the databases, they give you a little description, but every database like CINAHL, PubMed, Medline has their own website where they tell about themselves even more and their purpose and their focus, what kind of journals they cover. So you just want to review and evaluate those pieces for appropriateness to your topic. Then, once you open those databases, you're going to start searching for primary evidence. And you're going to do a matrix. Remember that first tool I told you about? That's a table. Lets you kind of just briefly summarize 10 pieces so you can compare and contrast across time, or not across time, but across the articles themselves. And then you'll do an annotated bib for each piece on the matrix as well. And that's your detail. Why is this important to the topic? Then, because we do this in scholarly writing, you're going to set back and reflect on your search strategy. You know, what resources, databases did you start with? What keywords did you start with? Did you have to revise it? Did you learn other keywords? And every time you do a database search or a literature review search, you're going to learn new keywords. You open up an article that's really close to your topic and you'll see them use a different word in their keyword listings. A little hint, keywords are typically listed right below the abstract of every article, and it gives you a chance to say, oh, I could try that word. I could go back into the search, revise it, and add this word or something. So that's just scholarly work to unveil, show your search strategies to this reading and research. What if I had rather naive or limited articles and I said, this is all the evidence? And somebody would say, well, Brenda, where were you searching? And I didn't even enter a scholarly library. Well, they would know. Then they'd say, well, your databases you probably should have used would have been this and this and this. What would the experts say this evidence would be? Now, the key part of a literature review for that scenario I told you about, I'm the new nurse and you're schooling me up on your topic. The key part is going to come now in E, F, and G, where you are going to synthesize and summarize. I mean, F, G, and H. You're going to compare and contrast these findings. You're going to find things that are similar, things that are a little different or disparate. You're going to discuss that for me, and you're going to put it in a narrative way in paragraphs, maybe even topic group headings. Say, here's the part of research about this. Here's the part of research about this part. Remembering that you're speaking to me and you're giving this to me as clearly as I can so I can retain it. Then you go back and you scrub through your 10 pieces and say, what does evidence actually tell us are the best practices related to this piece of research? I think you might have seen my intro YouTube where I say we don't use a lot of evidence in practice, surprisingly. We do more because we think it's good, or we just do it because we say we know that's best. That's the way we've always have done it. So avoid that knee-jerk answer, this is the best way to do it, and really look to have evidence support, research support, your statement that these are best practices. So look at your evidence, look at your literature. What do they tell you the recommendations are? And here's another great piece for a scholarly thinker to do, is to stop and say, well, we know we know this from the evidence now. Here's the state of the science. Here's what we don't know. That is a good practice for a nurse scholar to do, because it sets us up for further inquiry or watching if more evidence comes out. Maybe new research comes out and does fill those gaps. There's always a gap in knowledge. You know, how do we use it? How do we apply it? How do we study it further? Those are the kind of things that you use about you examining gaps. And now the last part, this is really my passion from me as a nurse educator of evidence to you as a practitioner of it right now, and a nurse leader with your advanced degree. I really want you to think how you can create an evidence-based practice environment, a culture of inquiry in your workplace, in your setting. Reflect on what you would do, and there might be an example. What if I were a nurse on your unit and I came to you and I said, I really want to investigate why we do this, X and such. What would you as a nurse leader expect to have to help me with? Would you assess me for my ability to use a library or even my access to it? Would you make time and place for it? Those kind of nursing leadership things that you would do Because a culture of inquiry is a culture that grows, that uses evidence in practice, promotes safety. I think you've all heard these words probably in different courses, but here's your chance to say, reflect back on what you would do as a nurse leader to support putting evidence into your practice yourself and those of the nurses you lead. Okay, I've gone on and on a bit. I want you to notice that the matrix is attached here. You can use this matrix or you can create your own. It's simply a table where you would list the authors, where you got it from, the year of publication, the type of research, the population that they studied, what was their sample and their sample size, what were the outcome measures they explored. Outcome measures are what are the variables that participated in understanding the outcomes of this study. That is different than pertinent data. Pertinent data from the results are something that was statistically significant or important enough that that was their primary results. And then what were their conclusions, which conclusions are also different than the results because their conclusions are more often geared towards how did their results compare to other research or how did they apply their results. Conclusions oftentimes have best practices statements in it. And the comments section is simply comments to yourself. As you start listing the first, second, and third article on here, you might notice some that are more powerful or disparate in their findings that were opposite of something else. This is where you need to make your notes to yourself so you can remember that. Be sure to use phrases and keep this matrix usable to yourself. If you put so much content in here that it spans pages, you can't easily compare and contrast back and forth. You can't see, well, what were all the years, what were the most recent years published? You want to make this a usable tool for you. And I've got to get back to task stream here before I get to lost. Also, notice an annotated bib is a specialized format of summarizing and assessing and reflecting on your source. They are your words. You're not told specifically what you have to do in here, but you take a paragraph or two and summarize what you feel is important in this article. I'm trying to get to the example, and here they are. Here's how an annotated bib looks. It has the full citation, APA reference list style citation, and followed by content. So here's a annotation on a television show. Here's an annotation on an article. And I think, yes, and here's an example of an MLA. We would like to look at the APA. They're pretty similar. But they put it in full APA citation that you would see in a reference list, and then they wrote following it. Even though you have an annotation in your paper, and I would put the annotations right in the paper where it's called for, even though you have annotations in there, you still have a full reference list following your paper. And if you noticed, annotations and the were part D2. So I would attach the matrix right in the paper and I would follow it with the annotations. And then I would have headings for the rest of the sections. I'd have headings for all the sections. Topic under investigation, problem statement, 5 resources, 10 pieces, your primary evidence, presentation of evidence, matrix, annotation, results of search strategy, major points of research gathered, best practices, remaining gaps, nurse leadership, and then your reference list. Let's find one more thing. Let's find the rubric, because the rubric will also help you see what the evaluators are going to use, the statements. So when they look at your Part A topic discussion, having a heading directs them directly to that. Then they know this is the content that Brenda presented for the topic selection, and they're going to look at the highly competent statement first. I provided a logical discussion with substantial support of the topic, and why it's important to nursing. Substantial support's kind of a code word. That means I used in-text citation. I used the evidence of others. I supported my writing with evidence. Then I'm going to move on to the problem statement. I'm going to say, what's the problem in nursing? CAUTI's cost, clients, increased length of stay, pain, and I'm going to cite that, and I'm going to say thus, preventing CAUTI's in any unit, maybe my most specific unit, is a beneficial practice. 10 pieces of evidence will be examined to gather best practices for this problem. Then I'm going to move on to the resources, the matrix, the annotation, the strategy, revised search strategy. So tell us what your original strategy was. I'm going to go use these databases with these keywords. I'm saying this in first person, but you really do write it in third person. You just say the search strategy formed was blah, blah, blah. So that's the rubric. I want to note, it says here, when the candidate uses sources. So you are going to use sources. You're going to use at least 10. You may use others in your introduction too, but you're definitely going to use sources for this. So good luck with this task, and please feel free to email or call me. This is a project that this is a process of using evidence that I've used in my own education. I've mentored in online and on-ground education. The tools of a matrix and the annotations are going to serve you well in gathering evidence, and it's going to serve you well in understanding how to be a nurse leader, in supporting the culture of inquiry around you, in yourself, and in the nurses that you lead and that you affect every day. So good luck with this, and email or call for anything.